I've been making cakes lately. Ask Wendy. I go to Menards about 3 times a day, and so I always go through the food aisles, and their cake and their frosting is always a pretty good price. So I think I'm going to join the cake competition. I urge you to do the same. Bring your cake and your $20, enter, and then also you can do the silent auction to take a cake home. I'm also excited with Eric and Kayla Lee. They're sitting right back there. Can you guys raise your hands? They're the ones going to be doing the married couples group, and so I urge you to sign up for that. It's a first that we've had here, so I'm very excited that we're kicking that off. But we're going to jump in this morning. I'm excited about today's message. We're doing week 3 at our Summer at the River series, and we've been covering a variety of topics. These topics are designed to help you get to know God better, to get to know His character, and to get to know His Word better. Week 1, we talked about miracles and what that means for us today, and what the miracles were like then, what they're like now, and who does miracles. And it's God Almighty that does miracles in the past. He did them in the past, and He does them today. We also talked about last week, if you were here, our topic was the declaration of dependence. And we talked about how important it is that we humble ourselves before God as individuals and as people of a nation, so that God will have mercy and bless us. And so we talked about the importance of that. But this morning, I want to take a quick survey. How many of you have stress in your life? Every single person has stress in their life, right? Now, if you have stress in your life, how many of you didn't see it coming? It just kind of creeped up, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm stressed out, right? That's how it happens. Stress, it's not that like all of a sudden you become stressed. I think over time it just starts building and building, and then you get to the point and you say, man, I'm stressed out. The question is, because this is a silent killer, stress is. And so the question is, how do we handle it? And today I'm going to talk about that, how we handle stress, and also what I believe is a major cause of stress in our lives today in America. The year was 1918. There was an influenza flu pandemic that hit our world. Some 50 million people died. 500 million, a third of the world's population, got sick. In the United States, 675,000 people died. In India, 12,500,000 people died of the flu pandemic. That was 4% of their entire population. Now think about this for a second. You know, several years ago, we had this pandemic called COVID-19, and the CDC, whether you believe all their facts or not, they said that about 7 million people died from COVID. I don't know how accurate that is, but imagine 50 million people killed by a flu. And here's the thing, as bad as that sounds, it's not even the worst. In 1346 to the year 1353, 75 million people died from the plague. They called it Black Death. It wiped out almost half of the population in Europe. Black Death. What was it? Well, it was caused by rats and rodents. And so what happened was the rats and rodents were infected, and they carried it. It got carried from one rat and rode it to another and throughout the crowded cities by the way of a flea. And so this thing called Black Death wiped out 1/2 of Europe's entire population. No one knew where it came from. No one knew how to stop it at the time. And only now, because of our modern-day sanitation and modern-day antibiotics, can a thing like this be controlled. But back then, there was no control. And you might be like, well, yeah, Andy, that's great. That's why today we have the CDC. We have such a thing called the CDC to make sure these things don't become an issue. Well, as you've all have learned, perhaps the CDC isn't always the greatest and foolproof at the advice they give on how to stop a pandemic. But I believe we have another pandemic. It's certainly an epidemic here in the United States of America, and it's a silent killer that we have going on. It's already swept throughout our culture. You may have it and not even know it. Maybe by the end of this, you'll figure out whether you have it or not. It's not a flu. It's not COVID-19. It's not a plague. It's something called affluenza. It's called affluenza. It's something, you don't get it from a rat or a rodent or a flea. You get it from being caught up in the rat race that happens here in our culture today. Here's the simple definition of affluenza. It's a preoccupation with work and earning more money. It's extreme materialism and consumerism. It's chronic dissatisfaction with your current situation. Affluenza. It's often caused by the myth that money can buy happiness. There's no direct link between income and contentment. It's not there. Affluenza isn't just something you find in the wealthy of the world either. Right? It strikes all of us, no matter what your level of wealth is, and it's widespread. It attacks relationships, marriages, it attacks families, and our children often suffer because of affluenza. Brokenness is left in its wake. You see, I know about affluenza because I've had to overcome it myself, personally. I have to guard against it. You know, when I raised my boys when they were little, I saw parents that were sacrificing their children on the altar of success. They were more concerned with success in the business world and earning more and more and more money, more and more and more overtime. They neglected their own children. There was a song in the 1970s, I believe it was about 1974. It was by a guy named Harry Chapin, and he wrote a song called Cats in the Cradle. The song is about him neglecting time with his child for work and earning money. And then when the dad got old, he wanted to spend time with his son. And his son's like, yeah, Dad, I don't have time for you. I got other things going on in my life. And so the tables were flipped. It's sad. It's a good song, but the meaning behind it is sad. And you might say, Andy, I don't do that. I don't do that with my family and with my kids. But affluenza is hard to diagnose, right? You really have to take your life and put it under a spiritual microscope to see if you're coming down with affluenza. It's a subtle killer. It's a spiritual virus that runs rampant in our society, and it creeps up on you, and before you know it, you're afflicted. And sometimes, like the song, Cats in the Cradle, you might find out you were afflicted with it and it's too late. Time has slipped by. And you weren't with your kids and weren't with your family and weren't with investing in God's kingdom. You missed out on the good stuff in life. How do you know if you have it? Right? Let's try to diagnose it right now. Ask yourself these questions. Do you always want more in spite of what you presently have? Do you have a constant drive to be successful and never really reach that place? Do you have a chronic lack of contentment? You're just never content. Do you chronically choose your job or your career over God and your family? Do you have an overscheduled, overloaded life with no significant time for God or your family? Now, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. Like I said, I've had to deal with this myself in my life as a younger man growing up and raising a family. So if that's you, if you can relate to those things, don't raise your hand. You don't have to. Just know in your heart. You need to know you're sick. You're sick spiritually. You're buying what the enemy has been selling you in the world. Why do we live this way? Why do we do that? I think it's because we live our lives out of fear, right? We're afraid we're going to miss out. The younger generation calls that, they came up with an acronym for that. It's called FOMO, right? A fear of missing out. And so you're constantly striving, pressure to succeed, pressure to make more and more and more at all costs. To keep up with who? Those around you. And then, do you ever really get to the top of where you think you're wanting to go? Let's say that you do. There are a handful of people in the world that reach this pinnacle of success, maybe, and right now I'm speaking financially. They reach the pinnacle, they get to the top in whatever area that is they're trying to get to, and then guess what? They have a different kind of stress. It's the stress to stay on the top. Right? It never ends. It's never enough. I don't care how much money you have right now in your bank account. I don't care how much you have. It will never be enough. You'll want more, and you'll want more. Your tastes just get bigger and better. It's never enough. So what's the cure? Right? How do we cure this thing that I'm calling affluenza? What's it going to take to overcome the stress of this disease? Living at an unrealistic pace, trying to keep up with the Joneses. How do you not do that? I think the simplest answer is the word simplicity. It's simplicity. So this morning I want to give you a cure. Right? It's a disease, so I want to give you a 5-part antidote for affluenza. Number 1, you need to be content wherever you are in life. Be content. You know, Wendy and I, my secular real job where I earn my living is in real estate. And so being real estate brokers, I used to go on client showings and listings and all this with Wendy. She does that mainly herself now, and I flip houses. But when you're going to these homes, you go into a lot of upscale homes, you go into new construction, new subdivisions, and you see all the trendy stuff that's out. And you're like, wow, my house stinks. Right? You see all this stuff, and then, you know, with flipping houses, like I said, I'm in Menards or Home Depot or something 3 times a day, and you walk around and we have to pick out products to make the house look appealing to sell it. And so you look at all the trendy upgrades that you can do to your house, and all of a sudden, your house isn't good enough anymore, right? You go home and you're like, man. But how does that happen? How does it go from, like, you could be content 1 minute with your home, and then all of a sudden you're disgusted by it? HGTV is making millions off of our discontentment. We're not satisfied. All because why? We play the comparison game. We compare. If I just had that bathroom, if I just had that kitchen, if I just had that movie theater room, I'd be happy. Would you? It'd be something else. So the question is, what would it take for you to be happy today? What would it take? The Apostle Paul, he knew a thing or two when it came to living a life of contentment, no matter his situation. And so the scripture reading that Sonny gave this morning, I'm going to read it to you again, Philippians 4, starting in verse 11. Paul says, I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. Here it is. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. When Paul wrote this, you know where he was? Prison. He was in prison when he wrote that. He wasn't out on the beach. He wasn't in Jamaica. He was in prison. But he learned over years to be content with whatever his situation. And he knew that no matter, even if his situation changed, no matter for the good or for the bad, he learned how to be content with that. Notice I said you have to learn it. You don't just automatically wake up and say, yep, I'm content now. No, it's something you have to learn over your life to be content. I talked about early comparison. I talked about comparing your house to other houses. Comparison, you know what comparison is? It's the enemy of contentment. It's in direct opposition to being content, and Paul understood that, and he learned how to be content. He didn't need more to be content because he could be content not by his power, but by the power in Christ. He could be content. He says in verse 13, I can do all things through Him who gives me strength. So maybe you're here and you've been playing the comparison game. We've all probably done it. I can be the first to admit I've done it. You play the comparison game. You look at what other people have and think, I wish I had that. It causes you, though, to put pressure on yourself. You put this pressure on yourself all because you think you need more. You think you need more, but I think the key to contentment is to consider something. You need to consider who you are in Christ. You need to consider what you have and be satisfied with that. You need to consider what God has done and He is doing in your life and be content with that. You'll be amazed at how much more comfortable you'll be in your life if you would just consider those things. We can all take a step toward that. We can learn how to be thankful for what we do have. Number 2, you have to utilize a compass in this life. You have to learn how to utilize a compass. You see, the fog of materialism in our culture, the pressure to get more and more and more. You see, that fog of materialism causes us to not be able to see where we're going. It clouds our sight, so we need a compass to point us back in the right direction. Did you know all compasses are calibrated with something they call true north? So it doesn't matter where you are. If you have your compass and it's pointing to true north, you know which direction, if you can. Some people don't have a compass in their head. My wife does not. So if I tell her north, south, east, west, means nothing. I have to say turn left at the target. But once you know where true north is, then you know all the other directions. There's another kind of compass, though, not a physical compass, and it's found in Matthew in the New Testament. And Jesus says this in Matthew 6:33. He says, "But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you." He doesn't promise you, when he's saying all these other things, he's not saying all of your desires, all of your wants. He's saying all of your needs will be met. You seek God first and His kingdom first, He'll meet all your needs. You have to trust that He's your true north. You seek Him first and foremost in your life. Calibrate your life in that way. That's what will point you away from the pandemic of affluenza. It's by not seeking success first, but seeking God first. It's by not seeking that promotion first, it's by seeking Christ first. It's by not seeking all these material things in our world. It's by seeking Christ first. Listen, I say all the time, there's nothing wrong with having nice things. There's nothing wrong with those things per se. But there's something wrong with it when that's number one in your life and everything else falls by the wayside. You've got to calibrate your life. First things first. God is number one. And guess what? That, in my life, that makes everything that flows under it better. It makes my marriage better. It makes me be a better dad. It makes me be a better friend. It makes me be a better person. It makes me love more when Christ is first. And I know that's hard for our world today because here's what people think in the world today. Me and mine first. I got to take care of me and mine. No, you seek God first, He'll take care of you. You put Him number one, and everything else will flow from that. I've said it before, Wendy does not want to be my number one thing in my life. She wants God to be the number one thing in my life so that she's treated better because of that. I can love her like Christ loved the church because of that. I can love her in a way that nobody else in the world would be able to love her because Jesus is number one in my life. Seek His kingdom first. When you just go after more and more and more for yourself, that doesn't bring any value to God's kingdom. It brings value to your own kingdom. Number 3, you got to learn to cut it out. You got to learn to cut it out. If your life is cluttered and overcommitted, You got this unreasonable pace. You're chasing after the world's agenda, not God's. You got to simplify. You got to cut it out. You ever watch this show called Hoarders? Anyone? Oh, man. I don't even know if you've never seen it, I don't even know if I should steer you in that direction. But, so it's a show where, if you don't already know, people like to hold on to everything in their life. And so what happens is some people get very delusional about it, and so their whole house gets stacked from floor to ceiling with junk, right? It's junk. Come on. Let's be honest. It's like old magazines and stuff, you know. They fill their homes and garages with things jammed full of clutter. No place to eat, no place to sleep. They got to climb over the top of stuff. And here's the worst one. You ever see it? The worst one is food hoarders. They hoard food. And so, oh, that's not bad. I know it expired 27 days ago, but it's still good. And so they keep all this food. They just hoard it and hoard it and hoard it. Until they realize, I think, when they get to the show, I think they realize they need some help. Right? They need some help to declutter. They're a little resistant during the show. It makes for good entertainment. But they realize they need help to get rid of what they are calling their collection. It's their collection. I could tell you some funny stories about collections. I was never a hoarder, but I had collections. I had a collection of Pez dispensers, a lot of them. I had a collection of the metal lunch boxes from like the 1970s. I had a lot of them. My dad was even collecting them with me. And so when my dad passed away, I had all of his, right? And Wendy was like, "What are you doing? You can't, there's no place to keep this stuff." So we asked the boys, we're like, "Hey, do you, like, if something ever happens to me, do you want all these?" And they're like, "Not really." And so, like, okay, I'm going to have your mom's going to sell them all on eBay, right? I'm telling you, I don't even know. You can ask her privately. Thousands of dollars worth of these Pez dispensers and lunchboxes, and we gave the money to them. Like, here, take the money now. That way you don't have to deal with selling them when I'm gone. Collections. Oh, here's another collection. This is a really good one, Sonny. I hope this doesn't embarrass you. But Sonny, when he was a child, I looked under his bed, and he had like this piece of cardboard with chewed gum stuck on it. It was his collection. He saved tabs off of like the yogurts. He just saved them in a box. I don't know why. But see, people develop these collections, right? Things they think they need. Hoarders, it's to a whole other level, though. And so we have to learn to cut it out, to get rid of stuff. We got to learn to get rid of the clutter that takes our life and causes chaos in our life. You may not have a physical collection, but maybe you have a different kind of collection. Maybe you have a collection of busyness in your life. Maybe you have a collection of selfish desires that overwhelm you. Those are collections in a different sense, and they cause you undue stress. If that's you, unload it. Dump it, cut it out, clean the chaos out of your spiritual house. Many people, even in these situations, they have a desire for God, but their collections crowd Him out because their lives are so cluttered, either physically and or spiritually. Number 4, you need to learn to conserve. Conserve. I know in my life, and I know in other people's life, and especially in the business world, sometimes you have to get tough, right? And you have to start analyzing what's happening in your life or in a business. And it requires you to look hard at how you're spending time and how you're spending your finances. And sometimes you have to make some tough decisions. You have to find a way to conserve in some areas. to free up so we can live and do business in an unstressful way. You ever heard the statement, less is more? Sometimes less is more. It seems to be very true. It's true in the business world. It's true in our families, and it's true even in the church world, right? In the behind the scenes of our ministries and stuff. We have to figure out how to spend less of our time, talent, and treasures on stuff, on things that are not pointing us in the right direction to God. Right? Churches do that. They get so busy with busyness and things that they forget the mission. And they're not investing their time and their money in the things that are going to draw people to God. And so we have to analyze it, make tough decisions, make things simpler. Dave Ramsey, you might know who that is, a financial guy. I think he said it best. He said, we have to live today like no one else, so tomorrow we can really live like no one else. You got to make decisions today so that when your tomorrow comes, you can live like no one else because you've made wise decisions today to conserve in some areas in your life. Number 5, last one, you got to cultivate. You got to cultivate. We live in Indiana. We know there's a lot of farms here. We're familiar with the cornfields and the soybeans. I think, a lot of Jesus' teachings dealt with farming. You ever notice that? I mean, that was what people could relate to in that day. And so a lot of his teachings had to do with farming because I think there's a lot of spiritual lessons in farming. Farmers rely on a harvest. But guess what? They understand that you have to first plant in order to get a harvest. You don't plant, you don't get a harvest. And you're like, oh, that's good, Andy. I'm glad you figured that one out. But here's the thing. Before you plant, you got to do something else. You got to cultivate the land. You have to cultivate. And I want to suggest something to you that I believe in the life of a Christ follower, cultivating could be also kind of compared to our heart of giving. Cultivating. I believe it's a key antidote for having this affluenza virus. I want you to just listen for a second. And I don't want you to be, some of you could get offended by this, and I want you to think it through, though, from a heart level. Because there's many people who identify themselves as Christ followers who, they don't give anything to God's kingdom. Zero. George Barna, he was a guy that he does studying in religious beliefs and behavior of Americans. He looks at the intersection between faith and culture. And they did research, and here's what they found. In the Christian world, 44% of Christ followers gave nothing last year to God's kingdom. 1/3 of Christ followers said that they tithed to their church, but then the research showed that actually only about 1/8 of those did. Those are just facts that they came up with through surveys. Even though the Scriptures in the Old Testament and in the New Testament point us to giving from our heart, right? That's what the Bible tells us we should do. So if we are to give from our heart, whether it be financially or our time or however we give, think about this. If we're to give from our heart, if we don't give at all, what does that tell us about the condition of our heart? We just have to be honest about that. I'm not up here asking you to give anything, right? And I certainly don't ask you to do anything that I'm not willing to do. But you really have to analyze that and say, what's the condition of my heart? And you say, here's what I've heard. In the Old Testament and New Testament, the main theme is that you give your first fruits back to God, right? That means first and foremost we give. So if we're talking about finances, we get paid or we get money, however we get it, and we go, okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set aside something for God's kingdom. Then I will live on the rest. I'll pay my bills. I'll do whatever I need to do. And I know a lot of people say, well, Andy, I would give if I could afford it. I personally know that excuse. I've used it. I lived it for a long time. I used that one in the past, but here's the deal. We can't afford it. We can afford to give. Why? How do I know that? Because we give to so many other things in life, right? We give to Starbucks. We give to Cookie Crumble. We give to the restaurant, Joe's Tacos. We give to buying concert tickets or sporting event tickets. So we do give to other things in the world. What we're doing, though, is when we cut God out of the equation, we're feeding the disease of affluenza. I just want you to hear me. We need to cut the fluff out, right? Cut the fluff out of your life. Doesn't mean you have to cut it all together. Because here's the thing. I will take whatever money comes through my door and through my family's door, I will set aside the first portion for God and His church, and then the rest, I'll take care of my responsibilities, feed my family, and I will have, guess what? I'll have fun. I'll go to concerts. I'll go to the movie. I went to the movies the other day. I got corn dogs and a pizza at the movies. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Nothing wrong with those things if your priorities are right. You just have to get your priorities right. Here's what I think you'll find if you do that. If you focus on what's most important first, then let the rest flow from that, I think you'll find that there's more than enough. You'll still have more than enough to live on. As we close this morning, I want to ask you, do you want less stress in life? Right? Less anxiety. Anxiety is a killer in America today, man. It cripples people. I know I've dealt with anxiety before. I personally know people that deal with anxiety, and it's stressful and it hurts on the inside. But you want less of that? Then you need the antidote to affluenza. You need to decide and make hard choices on who's number one in your life. You need to live a simple life if you want the good life. The simple life is the good life. Hard decisions. I know, because you get in a pattern of living a certain way and just looking out for yourself. But you need to trust God, that He'll provide for you. He'll supply you. Our image is found in God, not in our stuff. Today is not about a new program that I want you to implement. I'm not asking you to add more. I'm asking you to subtract. Subtract. Walk away from a few things, maybe. Make a conscious choice to not act or to not do. Simplicity says no. Simplicity says no to overspending and overcommitting. It says no to opportunities that tear marriages and families apart. It says no to the rat race of this life. It says no to the world's expectations of you. And when we learn to say no, we experience less stress, less anxiety that comes from affluenza. So the question is, what do I need to say no to today? What is it out there in the world that is over cramming my life full of things that really aren't that important? What do I need to say no to? I want you to think about that as you leave here today. Let's all stand, and we're going to praise and sing once more to the only one that holds the cure to our spiritual afflictions. Every Sunday I say to people, if you're here today and God's been knocking on the door of your heart and you know you've never truly given your life to Christ, you can do that today. You can find this good life that I'm talking about. You can come forward today as we sing. I'll be by the baptism tank. You can give your life to Christ, ask for His forgiveness for all your sins. You can find grace and mercy, a new life in Jesus, the good life. We'll baptize you today. We got dry clothes, dry towels. We have all the clothes, right? We've got socks, underwear, T-shirts. We got everything you need. So if you need to do that, you come forward today. If you just need prayer today, we have people on the right and the left that will pray for you, our prayer team. And so you come, and they'll pray for you today. Let's all sing together.